The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Alex Niehaus, and I want to welcome you to what is now our fifth edition of CTO Tuesdays. Today we're going to be talking about engine-managed correlation with Michael Rowley, the CTO of Active Endpoints. We'll get right to the topic in a moment, but first I wanted to mention to you a couple of ways to interact with us. The audio is on mute. You'll only be able to hear Michael and me. But we plan to do a panel Q&A at the end to answer any questions that you might have about today's topic. And so to reach us, you can use the chat or the question portions of your GoToMeeting user interface. And I will also be monitoring Twitter using the hashtag CTOT so that you'll be able to see each other's questions more conveniently that way. So any of those three ways we'd encourage you to use to enter a question and join us in discussion after today's topic. And those three ways are Twitter using the hashtag CTOT, questions, the question or chat areas of the GoToMeeting user interface. Two more things about GoToMeeting, which I'm sure you've probably already discovered. You can collapse the control panel by clicking on the double right-pointing arrows, and then they'll point to the left if you want to re-expand that control panel. And then I'd also recommend you click the Maximize button in order to be able to see details of the demonstration that will accompany today's material. So for those of you who are new, welcome, and for those of you that have been participating in our series all along, welcome back. Let me tell you very quickly what CTO Tuesdays is. It's a recurring webinar series. We've been doing them weekly. We hope to keep that up for some period of time, hosted by Active Endpoints and presented by our CTO, Michael Rowley. We tackle a single topic of interest to developers, business analysts, enterprise architects in the BPM or business process management world. We do it every Tuesday at noon at this time. You can always find the registration page for the next webinar on our website at activevos.com/CTOT for CTO Tuesdays. And you can download replays at ctotuesdays.com. And you might find some of the previous material, some of the previous webinars very interesting. Here I've listed the 4 that we've done so far, and I encourage you to download them. No registration is necessary, and review the content. And we'd love to have your feedback on that content as well if you didn't originally participate. Why are we doing this? In a word, it's about education. This is non-commercial. We're talking about technology topics, things that we think are of interest. We welcome your suggestions on what topics we should cover. You will see when we demonstrate product, typically we demonstrate it in ActiveVOS, and I think that most people have no objection to that. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn the mantle over to Active Endpoint CTO Michael Rowley, who will talk today about engine-managed correlation.
Thank you, Alex. So this week is going to be, in some ways, a continuation of last week when I talked about message correlation. And it's basically a simpler way of doing message correlation. So let me speak again to a little bit about a couple of the same slides that I showed last week to set context. First of all, message correlation has to do with the fact that a business process interacts with the services and people that it works with using a conversation of correlated messages, meaning messages that are related in some way. And the system needs to pay attention to this correlation because the system has to be able to route incoming messages that are just directed to the engine in general, or the service definition need to be routed to the right instance of that process. And the easiest and most common example is an asynchronous response, where you send something out, and instead of getting a synchronous response immediately, sometime later, maybe much later, days later, you get a response. Now, what I had shown yesterday, last time, is the mechanisms that are built into BPEL that allow you to do this. And it involves a fair amount of separate concepts, but you have to define a lot of things. Sometimes people have a little bit of trouble getting their heads around all of these concepts, and with correlation sets, all of the different varieties of how you initialize them and use them. But it turns out that the BPEL TC also allowed for engine-managed correlation. The phrase engine-managed correlation doesn't exist anywhere in the BPEL spec. But what it is saying if the underlying system has the ability to route messages back to the right instance on its own, then you should be able to use that without and not have to deal with properties and property sets and correlation sets and all the rest. So that's what engine-managed correlation is. It's the request for the system to do it for you. And if you use engine-managed correlation, you have a couple of conditions in order to use it. The kind of correlation the general correlation can be used for routing not just into a specific process, but to the write receive activity that's waiting for a message. If there are more than one receive waiting for the same type of message, you can get really fine-grained correlation. Whereas with engine managed, you basically get just to the right process, or actually the right partner link of the right process. And while BPEL doesn't mention the words engine-managed correlation, if you actually go back to the archives of the discussion, there was a push, and I was to some degree pushing myself, for the BPEL TC to accept this concept that the system might do correlation for you. And all that we needed in the spec was that the correlation sets are optional, so that you can have a receive without saying anything about how it decides what message it's going to listen to. It also means that there is no standard that says how to say that I want engine-managed correlation for a particular partner link or a particular receive. So let me show you the way that it works in a BPEL process using ActiveVOS. This is our designer canvas, where what I'm showing you is a BPMN with BPEL as the execution language. This is a process that calls another process as a service. Let me drill in. Some of you may have seen this process before. It's starting the estimation subprocess and then later getting an estimate as a callback. In the basic one that we typically show, we have in the quote process, there is the port type for it has both an input and an output and a false. So it has a synchronous response. But what I've done is I've created a version of this. Oh, wait, and before I show you the other version, let me also show that this is the one that has a correlation set associated with it. So you go into this receive, and you can see this CS1. And I won't show you, like I did last time, all the other things that you had to do in order to get that correlation set up. In a different version of this whole thing, I've created the port type so that it has no response. It's just got an input. And you only get the asynchronous response. And then I don't, in this case, I don't generate any correlation sets. But the way I make up for it is, let me go to the this is the process deployment descriptor. This is the thing that goes along with the process that help you with deployment. The communication to the sub-process is through this partner link. And you can see here this engine managed correlation policy. Now when I first created this, the policies were empty and it would have looked just like this. So what I would do if I wanted one is I'd go into the policies. In my list of policies, I just say engine managed correlation. There's no attributes. I just say OK, and I get it. So it's really as simple as that. You don't have to deal with any properties, property aliases, property sets, or anything. And then it just works. It routes the right requests or the responses back. So let me show you a little bit more about how that has to be done. In order for engine managed correlation to work, the guy on the other end of the wire, the partner, has to be able to receive a header that contains correlation information. Normally with the BPEL style of correlation, the correlation information is buried somewhere inside of the body of the message. With an engine managed, it's in a header. Then the partner has to guarantee that any response message or callback message is going to contain that correlation information in another appropriate header on the inbound request, and then it can be routed. What we observed is that although there is no standard that explicitly mentions BPEL's engine-managed correlation mechanism, WS addressing, which is one of the most widely accepted standards in the WS star world, WS addressing's concept of ReplyTo works perfectly. Let me just show you how that works. So what you get in the outbound headers is a ReplyTo. The ReplyTo has the regular address for the service that the process is listening on, but it also has a reference property. And the reference property, what a reference property is in WS addressing is it's something that says something goes here, but whoever receives a WS addressing message has to guarantee that any reference property will be reflected back, and the contents of this reference properties element will be put directly as headers in the incoming SOAP message. So you can see this, that we've got this ABX conversation ID. It happens that what we use to identify it is a process ID, and then a pointer to the partner link you care about, and the pointer is an XPath expression. You actually shouldn't have to care about that, but it's actually pretty readable. When we receive the message, we look for this ABX conversation ID. We find the right process instance. We find the right partner link within that process, and we route there. So even though WS addressing wasn't about BPEL, it worked well. And in fact, there's even something in the WS addressing spec that says that this ReplyTo is not restricted to the usual synchronous single request, single response pattern, or to a particular transmission primitive or map. The contracts between the interacting parties may have specified multiple or even a variable number of replies. And that's exactly what BPEL does. So by using WS addressing in this way, you can use existing SOAP stacks to be able to engage in some of this engine-managed correlation. Now, one of the things this means is that every outbound message contains a ReplyTo. And by outbound, I mean not just outbound requests, but if you've got an incoming message that is a request reply, the reply will include a reply to, which is a little bit odd, a reply including a reply to. But you can imagine, think about the client of the process. The client of the process might, let's say the process is something like a purchasing process where you're passing in a purchase order. You might get back, as part of your reply that says, yes, I got it, another reply to in that reply that says, any future communication should be sent to this address with this correlation, so that if you want to update the purchase order or cancel the purchase order, it'd be using this AVX conversation ID in the header. Now, because we use WS addressing, we can't have a separate routing of synchronous replies with callbacks. So the best way to get around that is to just not use synchronous replies, to use this style with partner links that have two separate port types, and each port type is a one-way message. So you don't want to have a request response message and then a later callback as a response. WS addressing would require that it pay attention to the reply to in routing the response, and that's not what you would actually want. Because of this, because you're using fire and forget style of messaging, it's actually preferable to use, in most cases, to use some sort of reliable messaging protocol. In the WS world, this is WS Reliable Messaging, but you can also use JMS for communicating back and forth with the partner. So that is all there is to it. It's really just a simplification of the concept of message correlation, although it's a simplification under certain circumstances.
Great, Michael. You know, what's interesting about this topic for me is that it very accurately sort of represents what I was hoping when we started CTO Tuesdays we'd be able to do, which is come up with a topic of great interest, cover it succinctly, and rather quickly, so that it wouldn't be a burden in anyone's day, but you'd learn something new and interesting. So before we start our panel discussion, I want to run through some more information for our attendees and also tell you how to get a hold of us if you'd like to. Our website is at www.activevos.com. There's a lot of technical and educational material in our Education Center and in our in-depth sections, which you're also welcome to peruse at your leisure. Once again, if you want to join us next time for CTO Tuesdays, you can register at activevos.com/CTO Tuesdays. Replays, when we are able to transcode this in a day or so, I'll upload it to CTOTuesdays.com. If you have a feed reader or a podcatcher of some kind, you can access the feed for just this webinar at CTOTuesdays.com/feed, or if you use iTunes, you can search on VOS Abilities, to subscribe to the podcast feed. And Michael and my contact information is here as you see it. So what I would like to do now is encourage everyone to participate in the panel. Enter your questions, please, in our chat or question area, and I'm also monitoring #CTOT on TweetDeck. I have a couple of questions, and I'll start with these, and if any of these raise questions for you, or you want to follow up to a question that you've asked, please go ahead and enter the questions that way. So, Michael, an attendee asks, do you always want an engine to manage message correlation? Is that the right way to style an application?
It is really limited into situations where you know the other end of the wire not only going to be able to reflect back the right headers now, but that at any point in the future, you aren't going to want to redirect the provider of the service to one that doesn't know how to reflect this back. So it's the mechanism used by BPEL is more complicated, but it is more likely to always work if you, irrespective of who you're sending it to, because it doesn't need any extra headers. It also there are complicated correlation scenarios where you route to a very specific spot within a process that this isn't going to help with, and so those will also be needed. But if I were to guess, I would say that if it's possible, the guy on the other end can handle it. 90% of the time, you should just use this because it's simpler.
It's simpler, and so I guess that's a simulation or testing question, isn't it? Which is maybe write the process, since it is relatively easy to change early in design. You might want to try writing the process using engine-based correlation, and see whether it works. Right? I mean,
sure.
You can inspect the headers, right, to see if ReplyTo is being
sure. Exactly.
acknowledged. Yeah. So, but stylistically, what do you think many people are doing? Do you think many people are using this style, or are they using the BPEL-based correlation?
I think for use within, to communicate to other services provided by ActiveVOS, where the implementation is an ActiveVOS or a BPEL process, I think that people are using this quite a lot. For services provided externally, they probably aren't using it so much because of the fact that the service may not know to treat the WS addressing headers in this way.
Yeah, well, you are kind of relying on this in a, I mean, as you pointed out, it's strictly supported by WS reliable messaging, but
WS addressing.
WS addressing rather, but it is an interpretation of it.
Indeed.
It is an interpretation of it instead of a hard, strict standard.
So in that respect, just a typical soap stack wouldn't think to use the standard in this way, even though it's, I showed that it's right in the standard that it can be used in this way. It may require a little bit of work on the other end to get it to that.
And so one attendee asks, and maybe this is an expansion of the discussion we were just having. One attendee asks, when do you suggest we change our PDD to use engine managed correlation? So I mean, once again, it's kind of a stylistic question.
What's interesting is that if you've already done it with explicit correlation and have it working with explicit correlation, there isn't actually much incentive to then switch with the PDD to use engine managed, because you've already paid the price.
Yeah, really.
Which is having figured out a unique identity and created a property and then property aliases for it, and all of the machinations necessary to get routing based on information in the body to work. Once you've done that, why go to the easy way?
Yeah, right. Well, maybe it would heal your suffering.
That's right.
Or something like that. So it is sort of a style decision to make early in design.
Yeah, you'd make it first. It's more likely you'd go the other way, that you'd start with engine managed and then say, oh, I want the extra freedom to talk to other services, so I'll get to make it explicit correlation.
Okay, I do have another question from an attendee, and I'm sorry, sir or ma'am, I don't understand what you've written. It's not in the form of a question, so I'd appreciate it if this is about default BPEL behavior, and so if that attendee would resubmit the question, I'd appreciate it, and we'll certainly get to it. So another question that I had for you, Michael, that an attendee asks is, can you mix the two styles? We've talked about when you would choose one over the other, but can you have partners that are stylistically using both?
That's a great question, and there's actually, short answer is yes. In fact, you can both mix one process that sometimes uses engine-managed correlation on some partner links and uses explicit correlation on others. That makes a lot of sense because some of your partners understand it and others don't. Right. But there's also, even within a single partner link, you can mix the use of an engine-managed correlation to get you into the right process. But then if you need finer routing to the right receive, you can put another layer of correlation set. So for example, you are checking on the availability of a bunch of items in a purchase order. If you're using engine-managed correlation, that will get your response to this availability request to the right process. But since you're looking it up for multiple items, you might want to just have a smaller correlation set or one that is less unique that just says what item I care about that will route within the process. So it has to do with what level of uniqueness you need to guarantee.
Yeah, as long as, once again, back to the style, as long as that check for the items was internal and you could control that partner's ability to respond to the reply to. If you needed to check a vendor further down the line, you might also need to use the more complicated correlations.
Exactly.
Good. So this is last call for questions to our attendees. So if you have a question that we haven't answered or you want more information on something we have already discussed, please enter your question now, or this question I'll ask will be our last for today. So we showed that it was part of a PDD specification. If you decide early in design or later for other reasons to rely on engine-managed correlation, are you tied to that engine? Have you locked yourself in a specific execution environment?
One nice thing is that while some people might do engine-managed correlation where they say, in order to use engine-managed correlation, the service has to be hosted by our brand of engine. And as long as you stay in our world, then you can use this technique. We chose not to do that. We chose instead to use a mechanism where you can say, either you can talk with another service that's provided by us and then you're safe, or we publish the approach, this WS addressing-based approach, explicitly so that you can modify external service providers so that they will give you the behavior you need. And any soap stack, or most good soap stacks, have the ability to do handlers to basically put in your own code in the message processing chain, both inbound and outbound.
To make sure the headers reflect what they need to?
So that you can, on the inbound message, you can see that there's a reply to there, keep track of it, and then on the outbound message, insert the appropriate header on the outbound. And so even if you've got a service that's provided by, that might not be provided by us and was not provided with a soap stack that understands this, as long as it's a soap stack that uses JAX-WS or JAX-RPC or any other soap stack that has this extensibility mechanism, you can code it in yourself. Pretty straightforward.
So the answer is no, you're not really locked in
right.
to any specific execution engine. Although it does, my conclusion after listening to you is that this is something you do think about primarily at design time.
Yes.
Well, Michael Rowley, CTO of Active Endpoints, I want to thank you very much for another very stimulating topic. You'll be interested to know that we were perfect in our design of CTO Tuesdays today. We meant this as a half hour, including questions, and today we started exactly at the top of the hour, and it's now exactly 12:30. So for our attendees, thank you very much. We really appreciate you joining us. We hope you'll join us next time, and that you'll look for this replay and other content that you might find interesting on our various web properties, primarily CTO Tuesdays. So thank you very much. Good evening, good day, or good afternoon, and we'll see you next time.